You know, every house has secrets. And today, we're going behind the walls and under the floorboards to uncover one of the biggest ones, the secret life of your pipes.
I bet you've heard it before, that weird gurgling sound coming from a drain. Or maybe you've seen that one patch in the yard that's always a little damp. These aren't just random little quirks of an old house. They're signals. So the real question is, what is your house trying to tell you?
Okay, I know this might sound a little dramatic, but it's totally true. Every single day, right below your feet, there's a silent battle going on. It's your home versus the ground it sits on. And behind your walls, time itself is basically the enemy. The stakes in this fight, way higher than you probably think.
So let's step right into that hidden battleground. In this first part, we're going to decode all those mysterious clues your plumbing is sending out. By the end, you'll pretty much be a detective for your own home.
And these clues, come on, we've all dealt with this stuff. Gurgling toilets, drains that just smell off, or that water bill that suddenly spikes out of nowhere. These aren't just little annoyances you have to live with. They are your home's early warning system screaming for attention. So where are all these signals coming from? Well, a lot of the time, the fight actually starts outside. We're talking about the enemies lurking right under your feet, the external forces that are constantly putting pressure on your home's plumbing.
One of the biggest, most powerful forces is the ground itself, and you can't even see it happening. In places with a lot of clay in the soil, the effect is pretty wild. During a wet season, that clay expands. It literally squeezes your pipes. Then, when it gets dry, it shrinks and contracts, letting the ground shift and settle, which puts a ton of stress on all those pipe connections until they crack.
And it's not just the soil either. There is a silent invasion happening in your yard right now. We all love those beautiful mature trees, right? But the roots are always looking for water. And your sewer line? That's prime real estate. They can work their way in and create these incredibly dense blockages that are just a nightmare to deal with.
But the threat isn't always coming from the outside. Sometimes the real trouble is brewing right there inside the walls. This is when your pipes, well, they become their own worst enemy.
The age of your house is a massive factor here. If your home was built before the 1980s, odds are you have galvanized steel pipes. And they have this one, you could call it a fatal flaw. They rust from the inside out. You can't even see it happening. Over the years, that rust builds up, restricts water flow, and eventually creates these tiny little pinhole leaks that drip silently inside your walls.
And this is a perfect example of why building materials get better over time. Today, the standard in most new construction is PEX piping. It's this flexible, plastic tubing that's amazing because it resists corrosion. It's a huge leap forward, even from traditional copper pipes, which are tough but can still get eaten away by hard water over time.
Speaking of hard water, that's another enemy hiding inside your pipes. Depending on where you live, the water flowing into your house is full of minerals. Over time, these minerals build up as sediment inside your pipes and your water heater. It's literally like plaque building up in an artery, choking off the flow and making your appliances work way harder than they should.
Okay, so we've covered the slow burn problems, the stuff that builds up over years. But what happens when disaster strikes, and it strikes fast? Let's take a look at the anatomy of a real plumbing emergency.
For a lot of homeowners, this is the number to watch out for, 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the temperature dips below that, so about -2 Celsius, the risk of your pipes freezing solid and then bursting becomes really, really high. And here's exactly how it happens. It's a simple but devastating chain reaction. First, the water in a pipe freezes. As water turns to ice, it expands with incredible force. The pipe just can't contain that pressure, and it cracks. Then, the real damage starts when things warm up. That ice melts, and water just starts gushing out of that new crack. So, knowing about all these problems is one thing, but it's kind of useless if you don't understand the solutions, right? So now, we're going to decode some of that plumber's language, because understanding these key ideas is what's really going to empower you as a homeowner. You ever heard of the 135-degree rule? It's a pro tip and a building code standard. Basically, to keep drains from clogging, you don't want a sharp 90-degree turn in the pipe. Instead, pros will use two 45-degree fittings. It creates a much more gradual sweeping turn, which just makes everything flow a whole lot smoother. It's just smart design.
Another huge one is PSI, pounds per square inch. This is all about measuring the force of the water moving through your pipes. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like blood pressure for your house. And just like blood pressure, you really want it to be in that healthy range.
And this chart shows you exactly what that range is. If your pressure is below 40 psi, your shower is going to be pretty pathetic. But if it gets above 80 psi, that's dangerously high. You're putting a ton of stress on your entire system. You're basically just asking for a leak to happen. That sweet spot is right there in the middle, between 40 and 80.
Of course, knowing the lingo and the science behind it all leads to that one big, scary question we all have at some point. How do you spot the red flags of a bad repair?
You know, it really just boils down to one word: communication. A trustworthy plumber is going to walk you through everything. They'll explain what they found, they'll tell you why it needs to be fixed, and they'll give you a clear, itemized cost. It's all about transparency, not some high-pressure sales pitch.
And that brings us to the final takeaway here: winning the water war. Look, the point of all this isn't to make you paranoid about every little noise in your house. It's to show you how awareness, well, that becomes your absolute best defense.
So let's put together your defensive toolkit. It's pretty simple. First, recognize the clues. Those gurgles and smells are not your friends, they're warnings. Second, know your enemies, whether it's the soil outside or the old pipes inside. Third, monitor that water pressure. And finally, when you hire a pro, make sure you vet them. Look for that clear communication we talked about.
So in the end, your home's plumbing system is in this constant, silent conversation with everything around it: the ground, the weather, the water itself. The only question is, are you listening?